Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Mess. So Tarek in our continuing series, is that an analog in your pocket, or are you just happy to see me? Where I go over all of the different open FPGA cores for Analogue Pocket, explain what they do, get you set up and playing games, go through the controls and all the diverse settings so you can enjoy a lot of different things on your new pocket. And today we're moving over to the arcade side on Jotego CPS 1 core. It's an absolutely amazing platform from Capcom and the core is spectacular. Before I get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, you got a Patreon link down below as well. But just be aware, if you haven't dabbled in the arcade cores yet, arcade boards were completely different than handhelds or consoles, so there's a lot of different settings we need to go through. Please follow along closely. If you see here, if you haven't watched my update guide yet to get your pocket set up, we have the Pocket Updater available. We need to run that on Update All, so it'll bring down all the Jotego CPS 1 cores, as well as all the associated files so you can actually play the games you own. If you don't run this, you're not going to have those Jotego cores, so when you go into the arcade core section on your OpenFPGA menu, you will not see anything whatsoever. So if you do need that link, it's down below in the description. I'm just going to presume you've already watched that video, but be aware we need to do this. To know if they are installed or not, just go over to cores and scroll down until you get to Jotego, and you're going to see CPS1 here along with a bunch of other folders. So long as this is populated, that means that you've pulled the core down, and we'll go through the rest of the files in just a moment. If we go under assets right here, this is where we're going to find all of the files and everything we need to make sure this is installed correctly. This is not a situation where you provide the files, the downloader is going to do it for you. You'll see this folder right here, CPS1, there's going to be a common folder as well as a secondary folder. If common is populated after running this update, that means you have everything you need to start playing CPS1. If it's not populated, you need to run that updater and look for the link down below. And you will see in this folder here, we have all the JSON files, and then we have a folder marked alternatives. There's more than one version in pretty much every CPS1 game, so these are going to be the main games that execute when you run them within the menu. But you have alternatives as well, different regions, different variations. A lot of these games got different builds as they evolved within the arcade, so just be aware there is more than one version to run, but I generally just recommend you run the main version unless you really want to get deep into things. Be aware that that does exist though. But so long as all of these files are on your pocket after you run the updater like I showed you earlier, then you're 100% ready to start playing the games. But be aware there's a lot of different and strange settings for arcade games. I'm going to go over all of those for you. If we go under OpenFPGA, CPS1 does not live under arcade. I'm sure a lot of people are going to assume this and not see it. It actually lives underneath an arcade multi because it's considered a multi-core. If we open up CPS1 here and go to run, it's going to give us all of the games that ran on the CPS1, including some stuff like Street Fighter Zero on the CPS changer, which was technically a home version of that game for arcade boards. It basically had like a built-in super gun to it. But you will see here when we get into the game, this core is just a 10 out of 10. I have a CPS1 setup, but I recently sold my CPS2 multi because of Mr. and those cores. Jotego does amazing work. You're going to get a perfect experience here once you understand how to set everything up, because it is more complicated than you may think. And you will see here, just playing around with this game, it's fluid, it's fast, the controls are good, it's everything you want out of a Street Fighter game on Capcom CPS right in the palm of your hand, or if you have a dock docked on your television. But like I said, arcade games are set up differently, and every single arcade game within CPS is going to have a different menu. That's because this game was a home release, so you're going to have controls but not any coin or test menu options. Now on the topic of controls, you can use pretty much whatever you want. Just be aware that Capcom stuff is a 6-button setup for most fighting games, so if you use a controller you're going to have 4 face buttons, and you're going to be using the shoulder buttons for your 5th and 6th input. My favorite controller right now for this, because I haven't gotten an arcade stick to work with my dock yet, is the 8BitDo Neo Geo controller. You've got your 4 face buttons, you got the clicky thumbstick and the 2 shoulders, giving you everything you need. And I am still looking for a good arcade stick to work on the dock. I might be building something. Leave me a comment down below and tell me if you want to see a custom stick build for the Analogue Pocket. Now, as you get back into the game here, you're going to see I'm going to pause the game. Be aware pausing is not available for every single ROM in here, it is just for specific ones. But if we go into load game, we can pick anything else, and let's just go into another game so I can really talk about how to set up all these diverse games so that they're working well for you and you have everything you want. Moving into Final Fight, one of the best arcade games of all time. Again, this core is just performing so well. Jotego and his team make absolutely amazing things. So if you're worried about the performance or accuracy to original arcade hardware, I can tell you if I didn't show you what you were using and I did a blind taste test, you would not be able to tell my CPS1 hardware away from Jotego's cores. That's how good of a job Jotego and his team do. But let's get into the menu for Final Fight, and be aware every single arcade game is going to have a different menu with different options depending on what options the arcade board offered to arcade operators. That's why I say you really want to follow along with this, because this can get confusing if it's your first rodeo dealing with arcade stuff. You will see here that we have a difficulty level, and we can set that all the way from hardest to easiest. Be aware anytime you change a setting like this and you exit out of the core menu, the game is going to reboot itself. We can also set this to free play as well. That way you don't have to enter coins, but sometimes I like leaving like 5 coins on at a time so I don't just basically pay to play and win the game. But you'll see here, now that we've changed the difficulty and gotten back into Final Fight, everything looks spectacular. We have this on easy difficulty just to show you the swap over from there. But there are different options you can play around with. Some are really meaningful, some are just fun. If we go into game mode, you're going to see there's game and test. Every arcade board has a test menu unless it's very old and just operates on dip switches. But if we go to test and back up out of the menu again, the game is going to reboot itself one more time, and now we're going to be in the test menu. Honestly, the core menu gives you all the options you need, except you can play around with all of the different sprite layers and check out some of the art within the game, including some art that was never used in the build itself. Some games do have options in the test menu that you want to actually articulate, some games do not whatsoever, but this is how you get into the test menu if you need to for any individual arcade game. Go back to game mode, exit out of the menu, and you're right back to playing Final Fight or whatever other game you wanted to play when you first picked up your Pocket and decided to go for it. Or something like Ghouls and Ghosts here, just an absolutely spectacular game, but it is hard as nails. This is one of the hardest games of all time. I have never actually beaten both loops in one sitting on any version of this whatsoever. I can get through loop 1, but I can't get through loop 2. But you can change all of the difficulty settings you want. That way, once you get further into the game, maybe it'll be a little easier for you. Just be aware, don't start a playthrough and change any options, or else it's going to reset the entire game, and there are no save states within CPS1, so you need to do it in one shot, just like you would in the arcades. Now as we go into the control menu, just for this one game, you're going to see just the controls it utilizes. Every single controller binding option for every single CPS1 ROM will be different. There's other options like cabinet type. You can do cocktail, upright 2-player, 1-player. By default, these are usually the ones you want to use. Whatever it selects is going to be probably the best thing. For something like Ghouls and Ghosts, you're going to have a different difficulty menu, and you can pick from there. But again, just remember, it's going to reset. And you can change the bonus life structure. You can do it at 10k, 20k, 40k, or 60k in score, and you can also set your default lives you get per credit. You can also flip the screen, but look at demo sounds right here. If that's not marked as on, the attract mode won't make any music. If it's marked as off, then it's going to be mute. So just be aware, if you want the attract mode sound, you have to make sure demo sounds is turned on. It's called demo sounds on Capcom systems, but honestly, I'm going to call it attract mode. But what I really want you to get used to is the concept that even though this is operating like if you're playing Game Boy Advance or Super Nintendo, one core that loads up a bunch of different ROMs, you really need to treat each and every core menu as its own unique thing, because every single game is going to do something different. You'll see here when we go into the Mega Man options menu, we only have 4 difficulties. We have different amounts of time we can set to beat the boss in that stage before you die. So just remember, every single game has new options. Don't set your options in one game and expect them to persist to the next one. It just does not work like that on Capcom CPS 1. I've already gotten some questions about this before I made the video, and it seems like a lot of people were getting confused as to why the controller bindings were not following them to a new game. But if you've never played CPS 1, it's an absolutely spectacular platform. It's some of the best games Capcom has ever made, and of course soon I will do a CPS 2 video, just waiting to see whether or not that goes to public from being a Jotego Patreon thing. That way I know that everyone that watches the video can enjoy the cores. but honestly, give this a shot today. It is a little bit different than you're used to, with all of those different menus, test menus, and otherwise being different, even though you would think they would be the same in a logical way. But honestly, CPS 1 on the Analogue Pocket has been great. Having all these arcade games on the go is spectacular. You throw it in a dock, it's so much fun. And if you follow this tutorial, use that updater, and go along with my steps, you'll be playing these awesome arcade games on your Pocket. If you run into any difficulties or you're having issues, leave me a comment down below, and if I can help you in a comment, I will. But start playing CPS 1 on your Pocket. It's just spectacular. Bye-bye.